And you know, now Heavy D is dead all of a sudden, and people saying that he didn't die of natural causes. He was murdered or killed or whatever.
He was somebody I really, really looked up to my whole life growing up. And yeah, I was super cool with Heavy D, but I never told him how much he influenced me.
Welcome back to BuzzBuster. I hope you were doing great. Make sure you subscribe and let's start. Remember Heavy D? Yeah, that Heavy D. You know the name, you felt the vibe, the smooth energy, that voice that made hip-hop feel like a party instead of a battlefield. He wasn't just another artist. He was the one cracking doors wide open for everyone behind him. He helped shape a whole sound, the kind that didn't just play on the radio, it took over an entire label. He gave chances to people nobody was checking for, even putting on an intern who would later become one of the most powerful names in hip-hop. He showed the world a rapper could step into acting before Hollywood even took it seriously. And when life hit him with real pain, he flipped that grief into platinum records after losing someone close in a moment that still feels heavy to even think about.
Heavy D. But when I finally got to mix it up with him, I did, you know, Heavy D, he was a special guy.
But here's where it gets different, because what the documentaries didn't show, what the tribute stayed quiet about, and what those retrospectives barely touched, was what he was really dealing with behind that smile. The label he stepped into was already falling apart, and the very artist he backed so hard ended up outshining him so much people forgot who made the connection in the first place. The same industry he helped build kept moving like he wasn't even there anymore. And just when he started stepping back into that spotlight, like he was about to remind everybody who he really was, everything changed in a way nobody expected. Forget the rumors, forget the wild theories. This is the real story. A man who held the door open for a whole generation, then one day walked into his own home, alone, with something already going wrong inside his chest. This is Heavy D's story, and it hits way deeper than the fame, the records, or the name ever showed.
Has Puffy ever been in a coma? Has anything happened to him? He must be the luckiest motherfucker, because it seems like everybody that worked at Uptown Records from the very beginning.
Before Uptown, before that moment that flipped hip-hop on its head, there was just a kid from Mandeville, Dwight Arrington Myers, born May 24th, 1967, in Manchester Parish, Jamaica, a place where the hills stay green and the air hits you with that mix of rain and sugar. His mother, Yulie Lee, was a nurse from St. Elizabeth, strong, no nonsense, the type to grind through night shifts and still have everything ready for 5 kids before the sun even came up. By 1968, when Dwight was barely walking, she made a bold move and brought the whole family to the United States. They settled in Mount Vernon, New York, a quiet spot just outside the Bronx, close enough to feel the city's energy, but still calm enough to have space to breathe. By 1973, she had worked hard enough to buy their first house, and every single summer, no matter what, she took those kids right back to Jamaica. And those trips, they weren't just for fun, they were shaping him.
So even now I throw on outfits and I think I'm fly, and I look at some old pictures of Heavy, he wore that shit 20 years ago, I'll be like, damn.
Dwight soaked in where he came from, heard the patois, felt the rhythm, and carried that energy with him. Mount Vernon gave him that hunger, that grind, but Jamaica, that gave him soul, no question about it. From early on, Dwight stood out. Big kid, loud presence, but not in a way that turned people off. He had that pull, that energy that made people lean in instead of step back. It felt like he already knew he was meant to be seen. By his teenage years, hip-hop found him the same way it found so many others, from park jams, block parties, and speakers blasting on the corners. But Dwight wasn't just another rapper trying to get heard. He danced, he performed, he brought real energy every time. There was a natural warmth to him, something most MCs couldn't fake even if they tried.
You know, I just never, trust me, I curse a lot, like a sailor or a bartender, somebody. But
his charisma made it feel like every line was meant just for you. He linked up with Eddie Farrell, or Eddie F., a DJ and producer coming up on those same Mount Vernon streets. Add in Troy Dixon and Glenn Parrish, and just like that, Heavy D and the boys were born. 4 young guys from a calm suburb, but they sounded like seasoned pros already making noise. Then 1986 hit, and everything shifted. Andre Harrell, fresh off building Uptown, got his hands on their demo. One listen was all it took. He made a call that would shake the industry, signing Heavy D and the boys as Uptown's first act. Not who people expected, not the names you might think, but them. And that move, it changed the whole direction of hip-hop in a way nobody saw coming. Not Diddy. Heavy D was the real foundation, the first solid brick in a label that would go on to reshape black music for years. When Livin' Large dropped in October 1987 and went gold, it wasn't some massive takeover right away. It was a signal, a quiet warning that something bigger was coming. A door had opened, and what Heavy D did next caught people off guard in the best way.
Heavy D was more than just a rapper. He discovered soul for real, acted in movies like The Cider House Rules, and even headed Uptown Records.
Then came June 1989, Big Time hit, and everything leveled up. The album climbed to #1 on the R&B charts, reached number 19 on the Billboard 200, and locked in platinum status. The sound was serious. Teddy Riley brought that new jack swing bounce, Marley Marl added that raw edge, and Eddie F kept everything tight behind the scenes. And right in the middle of it all was Heavy D, full of energy, smooth in style, moving with confidence and rhythm that pulled people in instantly. The singles didn't just land, they stuck. We Got Our Own Thing pushed into the top 10 on the R&B charts, and Somebody For Me followed close behind at number 8. These tracks weren't hidden gems, they were everywhere. MTV, ET, radio stations, barbershops, salons. You couldn't miss them if you tried.
Heavy D showed something different, and he did it his own way. He proved you didn't have to fit one mold to stand out. He brought fun, style, and presence at a time when the scene was shifting fast, and that balance made people pay attention in a whole new way. But the key moment in this part of the story didn't happen on stage or in the booth. It went down in an office in 1990.
I was about to go to Howard University, and I just wanted to see if I could get a place I could come and, you know, kind of work and learn on the weekends, and I got blessed through Heavy D.
A 19-year-old named Sean Combs walked into Uptown Records looking for a chance. He had big energy, strong ambition, and a personality that stood out right away. Andre Harrell saw potential, but also knew he was still learning, still finding his footing. Heavy D noticed it too, but he leaned in differently. He saw something worth taking a chance on. So he pulled Harrell aside and spoke up, making it clear this was someone who deserved an opportunity, and that moment would end up meaning more than anyone in that room could have predicted. Give him a chance. I'll vouch for him. That's what Heavy D said, and Andre Harrell listened. Sean Combs got the internship, and that young guy, who would later become known as Diddy, went on to build Bad Boy Records into a massive business, working with major artists and helping shape the sound of hip-hop for years. And it all traces back to that one moment, Heavy D speaking up and opening that door. That's what makes it stand out. Heavy D didn't just create opportunities for himself, he helped create them for others too. He opened a path that someone else would later run far ahead on, so much that people sometimes forgot who made that first move. But back in 1990, none of that was part of the conversation yet. Heavy D was at the top, records selling, shows packed, and everything pointing toward even bigger success ahead.
From All Right with Janet Jackson to influencing Eminem, Heavy D's impact is undeniable. His smooth flow and positive energy made him a true icon.
Then came a night that changed everything. July 15, 1990, in Indianapolis at Market Square Arena. Heavy D and the boys had just finished performing, and the energy was still high. The crowd had just given them a huge response, and the group was riding that wave backstage and outside the venue. It was a warm night, and like many performers after a show, they were unwinding, joking around, letting off steam. But in a sudden moment, things took a serious turn. A trash barrel was pushed down a ramp nearby, and Troy Dixon, known as Trouble T. Roy, just 22 years old, reacted quickly to avoid it. He jumped onto a ledge, but his footing slipped, and he fell from a significant height onto the ground below. It happened fast, with no time to react. Troy was rushed to the hospital, but sadly, he passed away the next day. The loss hit hard. He wasn't just part of the group, he was like family. From Mount Vernon beginnings to Uptown success, they had built everything together. T-Roy brought movement, energy, and life to every performance. His presence made every show feel bigger and more alive. For Heavy D, it was a deep loss, like losing a piece of himself while still being expected to keep moving forward. Many groups in that situation might have stopped completely, and people would have understood. But Heavy D chose to keep going, even while carrying that weight. He returned to the studio with purpose, keeping T-Roy's memory close, reportedly placing a photo nearby as he worked. The result was Peaceful Journey, released in July 1991, nearly 1 year after that tragic night.
So you met Heavy first?
I stalked Heavy D.
You stalked him?
Pizza shop he used to go to. I used to kind of walk up and down his block just in case his car drove by and I could
The project reflected a different tone, shaped by loss, growth, and everything they had been through during that time. The lead single? It was a bold move, a cover of Third World's reggae classic, flipped into a hip-hop anthem with a hook that stuck in your head instantly. It didn't just stay local, it traveled. The track climbed to number 2 in the UK, hit number 11 on the Billboard Hot 100, and went gold. The Peaceful Journey album followed that wave, reaching number 5 on the R&B charts and number 21 on the Billboard 200, eventually earning platinum status. Heavy D had taken one of the hardest moments of his life and turned it into the most successful record of his career. And the impact didn't stop there. In 1992, Pete Rock and CL Smooth dropped their tribute, inspired by that same loss, built around a smooth sax sample and the memory of a young life gone too soon. That track became one of the most respected songs in hip-hop, keeping T-Roy's name alive and connecting Heavy D's story to something lasting in the culture. The music was still moving, but something had shifted. The energy, the feeling, something within the group and within Heavy D was different now. And this is where things slowly started to change direction. In July 1993, Andre Harrell made a big decision. He let Sean Combs go from Uptown. The same person Heavy D had once supported was now ready to build something of his own. Not long after, Combs launched Bad Boy Records and soon signed a Brooklyn rapper named Christopher Wallace. Within a short time, Bad Boy was becoming one of the most talked about labels in hip-hop, while Uptown began facing challenges. Heavy D and the Boys released Nothing But Love in May 1994. It charted, but the momentum wasn't the same. The sound that once stood out now had new competition, polished, evolving, and coming in strong from different directions.
They were all writing tell-all books. Andre was writing a book right before he died. Heavy D was working on a book before he died. Kim Porter was working on a book before she died. And Al B. Sure was working on the documentary of his life. And then he goes into a coma.
The group didn't officially break up, but after that release, things grew quiet and the music slowed down. Then, in 1995, another major shift. Andre Harrell stepped away from Uptown to take on a leadership role at Motown. And the person chosen to step in? Heavy D himself. He became president and CEO of Uptown Records. Picture that moment. Heavy D sitting in the same office, his name now on the door, surrounded by plaques representing years of success. But behind the scenes, the situation was complicated. The industry was changing fast, the roster was thinner, and the business side was getting tougher to manage. At the same time, across the city, Bad Boy Records was growing rapidly. Major releases were making huge waves, and the label was gaining serious attention. It was a different pace, a different moment, and it showed just how quickly things could shift in the music world. Diddy was everywhere. Magazine covers, interviews, headlines, becoming one of the most visible faces in hip-hop.
It was the same kind of spotlight Heavy D had once held just a few years earlier. At the same time, Eddie F., Heavy D's creative anchor, his DJ, the one who helped shape that signature sound, had stepped into executive roles at LaFace and Motown. The core partnership that built Heavy D's music was no longer the same, and there wasn't anyone ready to fill that gap. By 1997, Heavy D stepped down, and Uptown Records was reaching its final chapter. This was the same label that helped define New Jack Swing and introduced major artists like Mary J. Blige, Jodeci, and others, along with the figure who would become Diddy. And now the momentum had slowed to a stop. Heavy D, who had been there from the beginning, was now looking at a space that felt completely different from what it once was. What followed wasn't a sudden fall. It was more gradual than that. Waterbed Hev dropped in April 1997, marking his first major project without the boys, without Eddie F., and without the full support system he once had. The album reached number 9 on the Billboard 200, number 3 on the R&B charts, and earned gold certification. Solid numbers, but the industry was moving fast, and solid didn't always hold attention for long. His next project, Heavy, came out in 1999 and also landed in the R&B top 10. But the conversation around it was quieter. The sound that once made him stand out, smooth, fun, and easy to move to, was now competing with a wave of new styles.
More than just a name, he was a vibe. He led Heavy D and the Boys, dominating the 90s with hits produced by legends like Teddy Riley and Pete Rock.
Producers like the Neptunes and Timberland were reshaping how music sounded, while new regional scenes were rising and changing the direction of hip-hop. Meanwhile, Bad Boy had grown into something much bigger, expanding into fashion, television, and other ventures. The student had built something entirely his own, operating on a different scale as the industry evolved. Heavy D adjusted the way experienced artists often do. He expanded his focus. Acting had already been part of his path since the early 90s, with appearances across television. But by the mid-90s, he secured a recurring role on Living Single, sharing the screen with Queen Latifah and Kim Fields. It was a new lane, and he stepped into it with the same presence people had always recognized. He played Daryl, and it worked. He was funny, natural, believable, to the point where people watching almost forgot he came from music. That's not easy to pull off. Then came Boston Public, a serious drama from David E. Kelly, where he held his own right alongside seasoned actors on a major network show. And in 1999, he appeared in The Cider House Rules, a film that went on to win 2 Academy Awards. Heavy D wasn't just trying something new, he was building a whole second path. But even with that progress, it didn't fully replace what he had before. The roles were steady but mostly supporting or part of an ensemble, not the leading spotlight. The pay reflected that too. Consistent work, but not the kind of earnings that matched the platinum success he once had in music. He stayed active though. Vibes dropped in 2008, followed by Love Opus in 2011. Both projects showed he still had it. The voice, the style, the timing, but the audience had shifted and the industry was focused elsewhere. By the late 2000s, estimates of his net worth ranged widely, reflecting a career that had highs, but also the reality of how quickly things can change in entertainment. It highlights something bigger about the business, how fast it evolves, and how even key contributors can feel the shift over time. And all of that was happening publicly.
But I never told him the truth. Like, I never said, yo, Have, you know, you're like my idol. But you really inspired me.
There were also personal health challenges developing quietly in the background without much attention. But Heavy D wasn't finished, not even close. In 2011, after years of being less visible, he stepped back into the spotlight, and the moment hit hard. October 1st, 2011, BET Hip Hop Awards in Atlanta. Heavy D walked on stage with confidence, like he knew exactly what this moment meant. At 44 years old, mic in hand, he ran through 3 of his tracks back to back. Then Tyrese Gibson joined in, and the crowd responded instantly. rapping along, energized, locked into every word like they had been waiting for this return. It wasn't just nostalgia. That moment meant something. It was real recognition, the kind that reminds people who you are and what you brought to the game. Just 1 week later, he was on another major stage, this time in Cardiff, Wales, at the Michael Forever Tribute for Michael Jackson, a huge global event at Millennium Stadium filled with artists from all over the world. And Heavy D showed up with that same energy, delivering his verse with presence and confidence.
Backstage, it felt like any other performance night. He had a towel around his neck, cooling down, talking about the long trip ahead, 9 hours back to Los Angeles. Nothing about that moment raised concern. It was routine, just another flight, another day in a busy schedule. Then came Tower Heist, released November 4th, 2011, just days before everything changed. The film featured big names like Eddie Murphy, Ben Stiller, Casey Affleck, and Matthew Broderick, and right there with them was Heavy D, holding his own in a major studio production. It was his biggest film role yet, the kind that could have led to even more opportunities on screen. At the same time, his personal life was centered around what mattered most. His daughter, Zia Myers, was 13, and by all accounts, she meant everything to him. He co-parented with her mother, Antonia LaFaso, a respected chef known from Top Chef. Fatherhood had added another layer to who he was, bringing focus, care, and a sense of purpose beyond the spotlight. Everything seemed to be coming together. A major award show performance, an international tribute concert, a film in theaters, and time with his daughter, all lining up at once. He returned from London with momentum building, but also with a serious medical condition developing quietly, unnoticed. November 8th, 2011, around 2:30 in the afternoon in Los Angeles. It started as a normal day, running errands, picking up groceries, nothing unusual. He arrived home, stepped out of his car, and as he walked toward his front door, he suddenly collapsed on the sidewalk. Emergency responders arrived quickly, and he was taken to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Despite efforts to help him, Dwight Arrington Myers, known to the world as Heavy D, passed away at just 44 years old.
Sitting for hours had formed deadly blood clots in his legs. As he climbed those stairs, the clots broke free and shot straight to his lungs like bullets. His massive size made his heart work overtime, turning a survivable condition into an instant death sentence.
It was a shocking moment that spread quickly as news traveled across media and social platforms. Tributes began pouring in, along with memories, music clips, and reflections from people remembering his impact. Weeks later, the official report confirmed the cause, a pulmonary embolism. A blood clot had formed in his leg, traveled to his lungs, and blocked his breathing. There was also underlying heart disease noted as a contributing factor. Medical findings suggested the clot may have developed during extended travel, including a long flight prior to his passing. It was a sudden and unexpected loss, tied to a condition that can develop without clear warning, bringing attention to how quickly health situations can change, even when everything on the surface seems to be moving forward. 9 hours in a seat, blood slowing down, pressure building, a clot forming quietly with no clear warning signs. During that flight, Heavy D was likely thinking about life, his daughter, his work, the momentum he was starting to feel again. From the outside, it looked like things were coming back together, but what was happening internally told a different story. Later on, theories started spreading online, especially years after, when unrelated events brought renewed attention to people connected to that era. Social media posts tried to link things that didn't have real evidence behind them, but the official medical findings stayed consistent. There was no indication of foul play, no signs of anything suspicious, just a serious medical condition that can affect many people, especially during long periods of travel. A pulmonary embolism caused by a blood clot was confirmed as the cause. It's a condition that can develop quietly and become life-threatening very quickly, particularly when combined with existing health factors. It's not rare. and it's something that continues to raise awareness around long flights and overall health risks. On November 18, 2011, his funeral took place at Grace Baptist Church in Mount Vernon, the same place where so much of his journey began. That city held his roots, his early connections, and the foundation of everything he built. The service brought together major names, people from across music, film, and culture, showing the wide reach of his impact. Among those present were artists, actors, and industry figures who had crossed paths with him over the years. It was a moment of reflection, not just on his success, but on the role he played in helping shape opportunities for others. Messages shared during the service included words of support for his family, especially his daughter, who was at the center of that loss. In the years that followed, tributes continued. In 2012, Be Inspired, The Life of Heavy D brought together voices like Will Smith, Mary J. Blige, Queen Latifah, Chuck D, Doug Fresh, and Eddie F., all speaking on his influence and what he meant to them. A common theme stood out. His contributions ran deep, and his presence left a lasting mark. And the music? It never really stopped. His songs still play across different spaces, celebrations, media, and new platforms where younger audiences connect with the sound, even if they're just discovering the story behind it. That signature blend of emotion and rhythm continues to carry forward. Even tribute records connected to his story remain important in hip-hop history, tracks that honor both memory and legacy, keeping names like T-Roy and Heavy D part of the conversation. The impact didn't fade, it evolved, reaching new listeners and continuing to resonate over time.
Legacy doesn't always show up the way people expect. Heavy D's influence didn't fade. It just moved into different spaces, different voices, different moments. You can hear it in the way artists balance confidence with positivity, and how hip-hop made room for style, personality, and range beyond just one lane. He helped prove that you could lead without fitting a single stereotype, and that idea stuck. People who worked with him often point to how he carried himself, professional, creative, and always thinking bigger than just the next song. That kind of mindset helped shape how labels operated, how artists developed, and how opportunities were passed forward. Even behind the scenes, his fingerprints are still there in ways most listeners don't even realize. And while newer generations may not always connect the name right away, the sound, the energy, and the influence still show up. It's built into the culture now, part of the foundation that keeps everything moving forward. There's also a bigger conversation that comes with his story, and it's one the industry still deals with today. Success in music doesn't always translate into long-term stability, even for people who helped build major movements. Contracts, timing, changing trends, and business decisions can shift everything quickly. Heavy D's journey highlights how important it is for artists to understand both the creative and the business side. Because while the spotlight can move fast, the structure behind it matters just as much. Ownership, planning, and adapting to change all play a role in what happens after the biggest moments pass. At the same time, his ability to pivot into acting and stay active in entertainment shows another side of resilience. He didn't disappear. He adjusted, explored new paths, and kept working in an industry that's always evolving. That part of his story often gets overlooked, but it adds depth to everything he accomplished. When you step back and look at the full picture, it's not just about records or charts, it's about impact. Heavy D helped shape a moment when hip-hop was expanding, becoming more visible, more versatile, and more widely accepted. He played a role in opening doors that led to opportunities for many others who came after him.
I was about to go to Howard University, and I just wanted to see if I could get a place I could come and, kind of work and learn on the weekends, and I got blessed through Heavy D.
His story also shows how quickly things can change, how success, challenges, and personal moments can all exist at the same time. It's a reminder that behind the music and the performances, there's a real life unfolding with highs and lows that don't always make headlines. And even now, years later, his name still comes up in conversations about influence, style, and the evolution of hip-hop. Not always loud, not always front and center, but steady, present, and respected. That kind of legacy doesn't disappear. It stays woven into the culture,
continuing to show up in ways people feel, even if they don't always trace it back to where it started. One more person carries that story forward, Zia Myers. She grew up holding on to her father's legacy in a way that's personal, not public. What he left behind wasn't massive by industry standards, especially compared to what the culture he helped build continues to generate today. But his impact? That's something bigger than numbers. His name still lives on through his family, through his roots in Mount Vernon, and through the people and places that remember where it all started. And when you really look at it, the hardest part of this story isn't mystery or rumors. It's the reality of how things added up. Heavy D was there at the beginning, the first artist signed to Uptown Records, helping shape a sound that introduced acts like Jodeci, Mary J. Blige, and others who defined an era. He supported opportunities, helped open doors, turned personal loss into meaningful music, stepped into acting, led a label, and stayed present as a father. And yet, when it was all said and done, estimates of his net worth showed a wide gap compared to the level of influence he had. That contrast says a lot about how the business can work, especially in a fast-moving industry. He walked through opportunities, created paths, and contributed to something lasting. And while not every outcome matched the scale of his impact, his role in shaping the culture is still recognized, and it continues to matter. If this story hit you, don't just scroll past it. Hit that subscribe button and stay locked in, because there are more stories like this that people don't always hear but need to be told. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next, and be part of keeping these real stories alive.